And Germany, which would have been very easy to put Hitler down right shortly after he was elected. But right after he was elected, he stimulated their economy with one thing you can say about Hitler was he was insane, but he was smart. And he was smart enough to create an ingenious economy and use the resources he had to build a tremendous war machine. And so we were talking peace and disarming while he was arming. And when World War II started, our defenses were at a minimum, and we had to put all of our energy into building up our armaments again. Whereas if we would have had not let our defenses down, Hitler would have never been able to challenge the world the way that he did. But he was only created a challenge because we disarmed. All the nations of the world disarmed except the antagonistic nations. And so as much as all of us want peace, we have to preserve a certain amount of strength. Just like a city needs a certain amount of strength in its police force. Without that strength in its police force, criminals would run wild. We'd have no home would be secure, no woman would be protected from rape. Everything would be bedlam. And so there's a certain minority of the people just can't seem to get it through their heads that we do need a certain amount of military strength to maintain the peace. Now, eventually the time will come when we may not need that. For instance, a couple hundred years ago, one of the things we had to worry about was one state fighting another state. And the states were very antagonistic against each other, but eventually they learned that this was not something that they needed to do. And now a couple hundred years have passed, and Oregon just, it doesn't occur to them to maybe fight with Idaho or Philadelphia against Rhode Island. I mean, it just does not occur for one state to fight against another, and eventually nations will be like this. If we can preserve ourselves, protect ourselves until there's basically peace among the nations. Now, our prisons, 87. Our prisons are too crowded, and we should look for means to reduce the population of the prisons while maintaining law enforcement and security. So, one of the problems we have is we have this idea that prisoners need to be punished, which is true, but we shouldn't have this idea extend to the extent that it hurts us by creating extra financial stress as well as the overcrowding of the prisons. And going along with this, number 88, we support long sentences where violence or the threat of violence occurred. Where there was no violence, the criminal should be given a chance to pay the victim compensation and not go to prison. So we have one of the largest prison populations of the whole world. And one of the reasons for this is we have a lot of people in our prisons that are not violent. Now, the people that are violent, some of them deserve to go there and need to be locked up, and we need to be protected from them. But the people that aren't violent, a lot of these people don't really need to be in prison. They could be punished in other ways. One of the ways that this can happen is they can be fined. And a certain amount of their salary can go to pay for the damages they incurred. Now let's say somebody stole some money from their business partner, and instead of putting them in jail, how about having them pay off the business partner and then paying an extra fine maybe to the government or extra interest to the guy. So what happens here is there's a lot more benefits. In other words, we don't have to spend $40,000 a year keeping the guy in prison. and the guy who has lost money gets the money paid back, and the government maybe collects a fine in the process. So it's a win-win situation. There's a lot of people in prison that could be dealt with in punishments other than just putting them in prison where they learn to just be a better criminal. 89, our correctional institutions need to put more attention on rehabilitating inmates so that they will be productive members of society. And so this is also an important one. It's true we want to punish these guys, but we shouldn't want to punish them so much, so all we're doing is making them more hardened criminals. We should provide more education for them so that when they get out, they'll be able to enter the workforce and be a productive member of society. Now here's some additional points. Number 90. These are just kind of miscellaneous ones, the last 5. Some members of all political parties belong to unions. Therefore, no portion of a union member's dues should be donated to a party he does not support without his permission. And this happens in, among a lot of the unions, is that, and I used to be a member of a union, and when you donate your money to a union and then it goes to a political party that you do not support or a cause you do not support, that, you know, that is not just. And so there should be some type of way that when a person pays his union dues, he says, well, I want, if the union is going to donate to any political party a certain percentage of mine, I want to go to this. And 91, all union voting should be done in secret ballot to avoid openly intimidating the voter. Now, if union voting is done openly, and say 90% of the people vote one way and then 10% of the people vote another way, and then the 10%, we know who those 10% are, then they could be targeted. And this isn't good at all, and I think the majority of people would, as a whole, would support something like that. 92, voter fraud must be stopped. There must be a paper trail on all voting done by people in general elections. The danger of tampering with computers is too great. That's one of the problems after the 2000 election. Everyone says, well, we must completely reform voting, so they put it all on computers, and then after they spent millions and millions of dollars doing this, they found out there was no paper trail. And then the problem was, well, man, somebody could get in these computers and create a false tabulation of the election, and there's no paper trail, there'll be no way to prove it. And maybe it's already happened, we don't know. Because there needs to be a paper trail, so if there is a possibility of fraud or there needs to be recount, we can be rest assured that the counting is fair. So I thought that was one of the biggest blunders that we've ever made, to completely reform voting and then have no paper trail available. So if someone did tamper with the system, there'd be no way to actually prove it. '93. Mortgage companies should be prohibited from lending mortgages above the appraised value of the property. And this happened, this is one of the things that caused the meltdown, was that they were loaning up to 105, 110% the value of property that was already inflated. Right now, on hindsight, we can see that it was inflated. If they loaned 100% the value of the property 4 or 5 years ago, that was more than the property was worth today. But to loan even more than the value of the property was insane. And this is one of the problems that created the meltdown, and it's a problem that's often overlooked. It's by loaning more than the value of the property is worth. Then as soon as there's a little downturn, then all of a sudden everybody wants to let that property go because they don't want to pay for it. Those who have purchased homes or property, 94, have to have an investment in the real estate and show a reasonable ability to pay the maximum loan payment. A minimum of at least 5% down should be required. Now they're making some reform in this area, making it a little bit more difficult. But this is one of the problems we've had, and the majority of the people really go along with this. I realized we had a problem in this area when a friend of mine who hadn't had a job for 20 years and was virtually making no money came to me several years ago, just shortly before the meltdown, and told me he was buying a home. I thought, well, how are you buying a home? Well, he says, well, the agent told me I could buy a home. So he not only bought a home, but he got about a bunch of money back in his pocket. Boy, was he thrilled. He hadn't had a job for 20 years, wasn't really making any money to speak of, and he bought a home and got cash in his pocket, and people wonder why there was a meltdown. Well, obviously, people that were able to buy a house and they didn't have the ability to pay, and all these people bought homes, and then there was a slight downturn in the market. Well, what do you expect to happen? Of course there's going to be a major problem. 95. We support the expedited construction of something beautiful on the Twin Towers site as a national monument to freedom from tyranny. The people as a whole, the majority, really support doing something at the Twin Towers. And here it's been, what was it? It's been 9 years now, and still there's nothing there. I mean, that just shows the problem of dealing with a bureaucracy right there. That's a prime example of how bureaucracy doesn't work and how our government isn't really working for us the way that it should. There should have been something built there a long time ago. But there's nothing there because people can't figure out what to put there. There's all kinds of disagreements, conflicts, and this is the reason that we don't have something built at the Twin Towers site is an example of what's wrong with our government. Just like they can't get something built at the Twin Towers site, they can't get us, the people, represented either. And so this is a major problem that just keeps resurfacing, and the fact that we do not have anything at the Twin Towers is a good teaching mechanism, a good meditation point to think of as to why our government is not working. I'll just point out one more thing that I think I'll throw in later on this, and that is the salaries of our federal workers are $123,000 a year, and in private enterprise it averages $61,000. They're making over twice as much, and the majority of the taxpayers do not think they are worth twice as much.